All right, everybody. This is a special tampering period edition of the 5 Reasons Sports Network Pulse of Fins Nation. So I am joined by several of my fellow 5 Reasons Sports contributors today, plus some special guests as well. I have Ron Canev coming off of his hiatus from the offseason. He's going to be joining us audio. I've got the Earl, Chris Early, Duke. He's going to be in the bottom left corner there. He's back as well. I have Eric Weideke, who's been filling in. I have Chad from Inside Leverage, who is joining us, and I have old friend of mine, Chad Ronnebaum. So we have two Chads, Chad squared, for this show, and we may have more people coming in as well. We may get a visit from Ethan Skolnick. We may get Manny Chang in here, who is a 5 Reasons Sports producer and Eagles fan. By the way, Eagles fans are eating right now. They have Saquon Barkley as their running back now. I can't wait for Scooter Magruder's inevitable NFC East video talking about how they just got the best running back in the NFL, the Eagles. So in any case, we've got a lot of stuff to talk about, or rather we have a lot of stuff to not talk about in a weird way. So obviously the tampering period, this is when all the teams start agreeing to terms. You're agreeing to terms. You're not actually signing anybody yet that has had their contract run out. You can sign people who were cut and who were had their contracts terminated, but as far as actual free agents that have decided that it's time to move on from the team that they've been on because they don't want to re-sign, those kinds of guys, we still have to wait, but they're agreeing to terms. And Miami so far has agreed to terms with Anthony Walker, a former Cleveland Browns linebacker who is also injury prone. So he fits right in with Miami. I guess that's like a prerequisite, it feels like, with the Chris Greer thing, is that if you haven't been hurt, then you don't belong on this team. But I can't say the Dolphins have done nothing. They did go ahead and restructure Jalen Ramsey's contract, so they got $19.9 million out of that. They restructured Zach Sealer. They restructured Durham Smythe. So for anybody out there who was saying, is this going to be the nail in the coffin for Durham Smythe by signing Jonnu Smith? No, it's not. And he's still crucial to the offense as it runs because his blocking is something that they can't be without. And they also restructured. Who was the last guy that they've restructured so far? I'm trying to remember who it was.
Alec Ingold.
Alec Ingold. Yes, fullback Alec Ingold. He was the last player that the Dolphins went ahead and they restructured. And by the way, that's only $1.6 million or so in cap space that they saved. So they are now cap compliant, but honestly, restructuring Ingold and Smythe, that's, it almost feels like they're nickeling and diming everything there. The one guy that we haven't heard from yet is Tyreek. He's been tweeting a lot, talking about how he trusts in Greer and he's not worried and stuff like that. So you would think that his contract is being eyeballed a lot, but it doesn't look like we're getting any news on that. I'm still wanting to see. Yeah, and Aaron Anders is chiming in. Thank you, sir, by the way. Aaron Anders talking about stay away from Dolphins Twitter today. Yes, that's correct. And by the way, for those of you who are listening, if you want to talk to some people who actually have some brains in their heads, you can go check out OnlyFins, only $3 a month. The link is in the description below of this video on YouTube, and you can also check it out once this audio goes up, probably under the 3YPC podcast feed. So in any case, I really want to see more than anything is I want to see the numbers on the Teron Armstead restructure, because we keep hearing that it happened, but we haven't seen what it is yet. And part of me is wondering, is this Teron Armstead thing an actual restructure, as in they're going to be kicking the can down the road and keeping Armstead for 2 or 3 more years? Or is he actually taking a pay cut because he realizes that his availability has been crap and he doesn't have a very good leg to stand on right now? So that's what I want to see. Now I'm going to go ahead and go around the horn here, and I'm going to get some first impressions from everybody. Ron Caniff, you've been on hiatus probably the longest, so I want to get your thoughts first, sir.
Man, days like this, I should have stayed my ass on hiatus. But yeah, I mean, I understand the off season's just beginning. Really, it hasn't even officially begun yet. Obviously, we knew we were going to take some L's with some of these good players. We knew that going in. But I just think Dolphins fans need to understand is you're not going to be able to replace these guys we lost with equal talent. Because if you could replace them with equal talent, that would cost you in free agency equal pay. And if we could pay other guys to replace them, guess what? We would have just re-signed or kept the guys that we just lost. So what you're going to be expecting this year, especially on defense, maybe in some other spots on the field, is you're going to have to sign guys on cheaper deals and whatever rookies you bring in, and you're going to need them to outperform their perceived value on paper, because I just don't see any way Miami goes into this coming season on paper looking like a better team than they were on paper last year. Now, I understand that on papers, that's a big thing. That's why I keep saying that caveat on paper. There's just the math doesn't add up. You don't have the money to replace the guys you lost. You're going to have to do it in other ways, which means guys are going to have to outplay what you were expecting from them. When you look at these guys you signed, you're going to need more from them than probably what they were signed for, what their value was in free agency, or you're likely not going to have as good a team as you did last year. And that's just where we are right now. Don't mean to be negative, but I just don't see any other way around that.
All right. Duke, what are your thoughts, sir?
Well, I look at it one of two ways. One is that we're going to miss these guys. I was especially disappointed with losing Robert Hunt. Miami finally got a good offensive line last year, and now it's not as good. And I'm disappointed we weren't able to re-sign Andrew Van Ginkel, kind of a fan favorite, do-it-all linebacker for them. But the other part of this is if you look around the league and see the contracts that are being signed, and you kind of understand, it's like, I think Miami's doing well to sit out. Not that they were going to be big players anyway, but look, we all love Christian Wilkins. And we talked about it all through the season that we wanted to re-sign him and thought he could be re-signed. He signed for decent quarterback money, $27.5 million a year on average. For a guy that's got a career 20 sacks. And you look at somebody like Chris Jones, who signed a little more than that, what he produces and how much of a game changer he is. And while Wilkins' presence will be missed, that was just too much of a contract for my tastes. Robert Hunt got $20 million a year. That's high for a guard. So, Miami might be doing the smart thing by kind of staying out of this first phase of free agency where everybody's paying everybody. And, some of these teams are going to be, I think, going to be having some buyer's remorse later. And when you look at the Raiders especially, they signed Gardner Minshew today. And according to NFL.com, he's going to be expected to compete for quarterback one. So you go out and pay big money to a defensive tackle, and yet you're having Gardner Minshew, who's kind of a backup, and Aiden O'Connell battle for your quarterback one. So if that were the Dolphins in that situation, how would we feel about it?
I mean, I think we'd be not that happy about it. But the thing is, Miami has a quarterback, regardless of what anybody thinks. Now, there are rumors that Miami is looking to give Tua $50 million a year. That's a lot. Even for somebody like me, who's a Tua fan and a Tua believer, $50 million kind of puts a little. That kind of hurts a little bit. That's a lot of money.
Less than $50 million a year, you got a bargain based off what it costs right now for a top quarterback in this league, based off his performance since Mike McDaniels got here. I expect him to get that $50 million a year. I just do.
Do you think he deserves it?
I think he deserves it. I don't know that he's worth it. But I think the NFL states that, yes, that is his value. Will it be the right decision for Miami in the long run? I think is more the question. That's a different question. But does the NFL market dictate that he should get that $50 million a year? It does.
Okay. Chad from Inside Leverage, let's get your thoughts on this.
Thanks for having me. Tough day overall. Some tough losses with Christian Wilkins, Van Ginkel, and Robert Hunt. I was hoping that we'd bring back Andrew Van Ginkel. It seemed that there was a bit of optimism on that side. He was working out in the building. We've seen on Hard Knocks, though, his wife seemed to love it here. It seemed like I felt like they were going to be able to get it done. In the end, he ended up signing elsewhere. Collectively, I mean, they did get paid. So that kind of does help alleviate some of that pain because you're not really like sitting here like, okay, well, we could have did that. At least for Van Ginkel, you may walk away with that feeling. But all in all, still feel good. I'm glad we were able to open up some cap space. You still have the Tua's potential deal, Xavier Howard's money coming available to you June 1st, potential to move off of a Jeff Wilson. They could choose to decide if they want to go ahead and restructure Bradley Chubb, which would kick a can a year down for him. You know what I mean? So potential to open up some more money for them, and still in a great place to build a great roster. And to Ron's point earlier about, being good on paper, in my lifetime as a Dolphins fan, rarely has winning the offseason translated to, success in the regular season. So I don't think it's necessarily a big deal. Still waiting to see the full picture play out and see what they do to kind of replace some of this talent. I do agree that you're not going to be able to one for one replace anyone. So just want to see collectively what kind of plan they put together with the first wave of free agency, the draft, and second wave of free agency.
A quick question, Chad. How old are you?
33.
Okay, so you're only like 3 years old. So how much success have you actually seen from the Dolphins, period, let alone off-season winning?
couple playoff victories in my lifetime.
Yeah, but you were like how old? 10? Not even?
Well, the last one I seen was about 2000. The last one 2000. I was like 10. Yes, 10 years old.
Okay, so I mean, winning the off season's pretty much all we've done since you've been a Dolphins fan. Chad Ronenbaum, let's hear from you, sir.
In general, I mean, I understand, the fan favorites part of stuff, but the reality is you got to really consider who you put your money in. And I'm seeing reports all over Twitter. We've lost so much. What did we really lose? How many Pro Bowls has Christian Wilkins been to? How many Pro Bowls has Andrew Van Ginkel been to? I mean, how good are these guys? I've never seen Christian Wilkins dominate a football game like Chris Jones. He's not that good. Is he good? Yes. Is he elite? No, he's not $27 million. He's elite. You want to know who are elite players? Tyreek Hill is elite. He's been to 8 Pro Bowls? Jalen Ramsey is elite. That's who you pay your money to the top players. These are good players, not elite players that are leaving right now. So, just keep that in perspective.
I would like to interject. I feel like if Christian Wilkins had been on literally any team except Miami, he would have been added to a few Pro Bowls. Just want to throw that out there.
I think Christian Wilkins has a really good motor. I think his endurance is unbelievable. I think he's a great locker room guy.
He will be a Pro Bowler his first year with the Raiders. Watch. I don't know.
Christian Wilkins turns 29 this year. Most of his contract at $27 million is in his 30s. I'm just saying. Last time we gave a $100 million contract to defensive tackle was Ndamukong Suh, and he was way more dominant than Christian Wilkins has ever been. So I'm a Christian Wilkins fan. I'm not trying to knock the guy. I'm just pointing out Robert Hunt is not a dominant guard. Christian Wilkins is not a dominant defensive tackle. They're guys that are good. They're not great. I can't recall a game where Christian Wilkins was unblockable. What I have seen him do is play 50, 60 snaps and make a tackle downfield because he hustles. He has a really good motor, but he doesn't come in and he's this guy that he's a Aaron Donald that's unblockable. And so my point being is when you're going to give the big contracts, I give that contract to Javon Holland. I give that contract to Jalen Waddle. They're much younger, and I think those guys are better players than Christian Wilkins and Andrew Van Ginkel and Robert Hunt. I'm with Duke. I wanted to keep Robert Hunt. He's a good lineman. But the reality is guys that are 6'3" or 6'4" and 300 pounds that can play guard, there's a lot more of those guys than the guys that are 6'6" and quick on their feet that can play tackle. You don't want to put big money into guards and centers in the NFL. You don't want to put big money into safeties and running backs. That's the current market. I would say right now you will see big dead cap hits coming for the Raiders for Christian Wilkins, because they don't have a quarterback situation right now. Would you rather have a top quarterback, or would you rather have a $27 million defensive tackle right now in the NFL.
Well, we'll ask that question in a moment, and I welcome Ethan Skolnick, the head of the network, to the show real quick. Breaking news, Eric. Thank you, Eric, for pointing it out. The Dolphins have actually added a body here. We've got former Seahawks linebacker Jordan Brooks agreeing to terms with the Dolphins on a 3-year, $30 million deal. So $10 million linebacker for the Miami Dolphins.
You got to see what the guarantee is, though. Let's see what the guarantee is first.
I'm going to guess that's about a $12 to $15 million guarantee. Just looking at the deal. That's your replacement for Jerome Baker right there. That's who Weaver would have wanted, I would imagine, instead of Baker.
3 years, 30 million. That's $10 million a year. Like for that, I would have just kept Jerome Baker around.
Well, it won't be $10 million a year. It'll be a signing bonus, and it'll probably be about 15 guaranteed. My guess.
Bye, Tyndall. Bye. They don't trust that guy.
And he's a significant upgrade in coverage from Jerome Baker. He does have some injury concerns, which kind of falls in line with.
He does he? I don't even. He's another guy who's always hurt.
Isn't that just an assumption? I think at this point,
it's a prerequisite. It's not an assumption. It's a prerequisite. How many times have you been injured? Let me see. 3 times. You're a Dolphin for sure.
I hear this about the
concerns. But 14 games, 16 games, 17 games, 16 games in all of his seasons. So he's only missed like 4 or 5 in his career over 4 years. I'm not. It's better. It's better than some of the other guys they have on the roster.
What's his age, Ethan? How old is Jordan Brooks?
Let's see. He's 27. I think
26.
Yeah. 26,
that's pretty much a swap out for Jerome Baker. It looks like to me.
Yeah.
He will turn. Let's see. Oh, it
he's
doesn't even show here.
Like he's a pretty young 26 too. He's got like
he
6
will turn
or 7 months.
27 in October.
Well, see, that's the thing about the injury concerns. Number one, it's NFL, so everyone's injured, and you never know who it's going to hit. In 2022, Connor Williams and Robert Hunt played every snap, and last year they missed time. David Long came to the Dolphins last season with injury concerns, and I think he played pretty much most of the games. I don't think he really missed a lot of time, not as it would have been expected. So you just never know when it's going to happen. So maybe this guy comes here and plays injured and misses time, or maybe he stays healthy. Who knows?
And to your point, he ended up actually playing more games than Jerome Baker, who's been relatively healthy for his career. So, you never know.
Jerome Baker also got his own man ran over him too, which didn't help at the
that's the problem. That Brandon Jones is the one who injured him.
Right, exactly. Yeah, he's gone too. The only thing I want to say, and I'll let you guys handle most of the show today, but I think why Dolphin fans are feeling this way is all 4 guys that left were like popular personalities with the fan base, and I think that's why this is stinging more, and it's going to be very hard to kind of get past that to actually discuss it in football terms, because I think people just have their feelings hurt right now. It feels like they knew likely Hunt was going. Wilkins was almost certainly going when they didn't pay him. I think they thought they'd keep Van Ginkel. And then the Brandon Jones thing. I mean, again, I think people got attached to him because he was good on social media with the fans and that kind of stuff. So I feel like that's part of what's happening today and then I feel like 3 of those 4 guys were featured prominently on Hard Knocks. So I think that's adding to this too. I think the fans felt like they knew these guys, and so there's going to be a little sting for a little while. That's kind of what I took out of today, expecting everybody to be gone except maybe Van Ginkel, basically.
I mean, I'll be honest. I expected a lot of people to be gone too, but like you mentioned, it's a lot of culture that just left as well. Like we've talked about how Mike McDaniel's making friends with Eric Spoelstra. He's trying to kind of replicate that Miami Heat culture into the Dolphins. When you lose all your players that basically cultivated that exact thing, you lose Christian Wilkins, who was the consummate teammate. You lose the likes of Andrew Van. Everybody loved Van Ginkel. He was a lot of fun to be around on that locker room. You lose out on Robert Hunt, another personality like you mentioned, but it's a positive one. Not to say that guys like Tyreek and Jalen Ramsey don't have personality. Obviously they do, but to some extent, there's also been in the past, at least, and in Tyreek's case, it's the present too. There's some kind of stigma around them that kind of makes it, well, do you really want the personality there, or do you want that toned down in their case? In Tyreek's case, I would love if he could stay out of trouble for like 10 minutes, but
But I think Lewis, what you're getting at a little bit is that Tyreek and Jalen came in from other places, right? Like they made their names in other places. Obviously, Tyreek has taken it up another level here, but I do think that the blueprint, supposedly, when they did the teardown, was that they were going to draft players and build a culture around those players, right? Because they were starting totally fresh, like they, and I understand that McDaniel wasn't the coach at that time; it was Flores. But it's like, I mean, these are guys that you actually hit on in the draft. And I don't think Wilkins is worth that kind of money. But I also think that they should have made more of an effort to extend him before the season was out. Like, I mean, these are decisions you make when you let guys get to market. And if you're going to be in a situation where the good players you draft are going to go, that's the kind of turnover you can't have. Trust me, there are a lot of Heat fans who wish that the Heat would get rid of some players and bring in some new ones, and Pat doesn't feel like doing that anymore. But I mean, I'm podcasting on that in about 15 minutes. But I just think that with the Dolphins, it comes down to they didn't hit in the draft for a long time. They hit on a few guys over the course of the past 5 years or so. And I think the fans just want those guys to stay. And until we see this in training camp, it's going to be hard to get past the emotion of it. And this is the other thing. I've seen this all day. I know this is Alfredo's point. The Chris Greer can't draft narrative dead since his former draft picks got paid handsomely. I guess that's the silver lining in this. Somebody, it's like if somebody wants my ex-wife, I guess, but that doesn't mean I have good taste necessarily. So I think I don't want to overstate that whole point. I just think that, again, people are going to be emotional about this, and Greer is not going to be given a lot of time to build it again. From the fans' point of perspective, Ross may give him until he's 100, but from the fans' perspective, I don't think they're going to be that patient.
Yeah.
Well, you look at it too. He hit on Wilkins. That was when Greer took over in 2019 as the full-time guy. Didn't have anybody looking over him. He hit on Christian Wilkins, just signed for $27.5 million a year. Then the next draft, he looks like he hit on Tua. He hit on Austin Jackson. Then 2021, he hit on Waddle, Jalen Phillips, and Javon Holland.
I don't know if I'm willing to say he hit on Austin Jackson yet.
They
paid him,
but he got extended.
I wouldn't call that
extended.
It
was a modest extension. It was a modest extension, but he got extended. But the fact is, he hit on these guys in the draft, and now you've got to re-sign them. So you look at, as Chad and others have pointed out, if you look at where you're going to allocate your funds, do you want to put $27.5 million on Christian Wilkins, or do you want to use some of those funds for guys like Waddle, for Jalen Phillips, for Javon Holland, who are, in my opinion, better players at their position than Wilkins is? And you're going to need to find those guys soon.
And they're significantly younger. I mean, a lot of people think Wilkins is pretty young, but like I said, that contract he just signed, only 1 year of that's in his 20s. And commonly, defensive tackles don't dominate the NFL in their 30s. And that's what Wilkins will be, getting $27 million a year in that contract. And so I think he's a very good player, but I don't think he's that good. Like if you were to have a draft on just defensive tackles, Christian Wilkins wouldn't be one of the top 5 taken. Like he wouldn't be taken ahead of Quinnen Williams and guys like that. They're a little more dominant than he is. He's a good player. I'm not trying to knock him. I'm not trying to knock Robert Hunt or any of them, but I think in terms of Chris Greer, I'm pretty sure he tried to offer Wilkins probably what I would say he's worth, probably around $20 million a year. He wouldn't take it, so instead they signed Sealer. I think they tried to do the same thing with Robert Hunt. He wouldn't take it, and so they signed Austin Jackson. And it worked out for those guys. They didn't get hurt. And, Connor Williams did the same thing that didn't work out for Connor Williams. He lost because he's not going to play till October, November. Connor Williams is not getting a big offseason contract right now. He's probably going to have to do a 1-year prove-it deal and then try to hit free agency in 2025 because he didn't take the deal the Dolphins offered him, and he played and got injured. And that same thing could have happened to Wilkins or Hunt. And so I think Chris Greer has been making that point that they bet on themselves and won, and that's what he means is they had good seasons and they were healthy and they cashed in on free agency. But like I said, you got to look at the youth and you got to look at where the money's at. And here's the harsh reality right now for the NFL. Like I'm old. I've seen them sign a really fast wide receiver in Mike Wallace instead of Tyreek Hill. I've seen them sign a Pro Bowl left tackle in Brandon Alberts, who was injury prone. I've seen them do that old.
I still remember that too, Chad.
Well, I'm just saying this is like they've done those same moves before, But what I do know is if you look at 6 of the last 8 Super Bowl winners, there's only Matt Stafford and Nick Foles. It wasn't Tom Brady or Patrick Mahomes or Peyton Manning winning the Super Bowl. And so this is all about Tua right now. How good is Tua really? And everything else is more replaceable. Is Tua a top 5, top 10 quarterback? If he is, we're going to be successful. If he's not, then we're probably not going to be successful. And I think you can get a quality defensive tackle in free agency. Is it going to be Christian Wilkins? Maybe not. Maybe we can get one in the first round. But I think you can get a guy that can fill that need, but you can't just go get another quarterback right now. I mean, what did Cousins get? 45 million? I wasn't sure what he got paid. But I mean, this is a 35-year-old quarterback coming off an Achilles injury that's getting that. So, yeah, Tua's going to get.
Got signed already?
I thought he's going to Atlanta.
4 years, 180 to Atlanta.
Oh, I didn't see that.
Yeah, he's signed it. I just want to bring this up because Cameron Wolf just tweeted Dolphins 3-year agreement with Jordan Brooks is for a base value of 3 years, $26.25 million per source. He can make up to a maximum of $10 million per year. So some incentives, no signing bonus given. Yeah, but right, so I assume some incentives in there to possibly get it up to the 30 million. And look, and I'm gonna leave here and so I can put out a podcast for angry Heat fans. But my major take on this is first thing. We know what the needs are, right? Like, I mean, the pass rushing room, their edge rushers right now, Shad tweeted out Bradley Chubb ACL. I mean, what are we looking at? October, November, maybe before he's full strength. Okay. Jalen Phillips, who I would trust more than anybody to come back quickly and, strongly from an injury, but it's an Achilles for a pass rusher. So nobody knows what he's going to look like when he comes back. When do we expect him back?
I mean,
again,
Cameron
October,
Wake.
I've heard it's looking in September, but I'm not as worried about the time frame as how is his ability going to change after the Achilles,
right.
Like his quickness off the edge and stuff like that.
Right, and then Cam Good coming off a patella tendon injury, Quentin Bell and Zeke Vandenberg. Those are edge rushers.
Yeah.
So I mean, now
they're
most
of those guys.
Right, and now for whatever people thought of X, now they don't even have X on the back end, so they're going to need a pass rush, right? I mean, I would figure, so now they're kind of in a position where my concern is if they don't pick up a couple in free agency or trades, they're going to go into the draft and teams are going to know that they are desperate to get up and get a pass rusher, and then Greer might get raked over the coals for future picks. So that's something that I would watch here because you literally cannot count on a single pass rusher on their roster to give you 3 sacks. I mean,
I don't think they can put resources into edge rushers anyway because of the contract with Chubb and with Phillips. I mean, you got to know you can't go put a massive contract into an edge rusher who's going to be a rotational player, and you can't use your high draft picks for an edge rusher when you don't have starting centers and guards and D tackles. I mean, they have more pressing needs. So I think for the reality for Dolphin fans, you're going to see either a mid-level free agent or you're going to see literally like late round draft picks or undrafted edge players. And they're just going to try to probably patch that together through September and October. And I would anticipate a blitz heavy scheme. That's how they're going to try to compensate to put pressure on the passer until Chubb and Phillips are healthy. And I guess that's just going to be the hope. But what choice do the Dolphins have but to bank on Chubb and Phillips coming back?
To be fair, the Ravens were viewed as a pass rush deficient team going into the season. They added Clowney, and then they added Kyle Van Noy kind of late, and they were able to get a significant boost in that department from those guys. So with that money from Xavier Howard, and you have the money that's becoming available with Tua extension, I think there's a room for us to still, even after the draft, if we're to miss out, still address those positions. Maybe not with high-end guys, but to you guys' point, I don't think we need that, being that we already have so much money allocated to those positions.
Yeah. Hey, Ethan, before you go, so on the new linebacker signing, are we back over the cap again? Do you happen to know? Or does anybody know?
I don't know. I would have to. I didn't have time to do the quick math on that, but
I mean, I would imagine that's where they're going to have to restructure.
Sure. I'm looking here.
Yeah, we were approximately 25, I want to say, over, and I think we created 28 with the moves, and they're still trying to finalize the Armstead thing. So we should.
Oh yeah, you know what? We still haven't even seen the numbers on Teron
Yeah.
Armstead, which is the main thing
Right.
here. Like, how much of a pay cut is he actually taking? And I really do believe that it is a pay cut. They are not restructuring him so they keep him another 3 or 4 years. There's no way.
No. I mean, in
Well-
3 or 4 years, he played 3 or 4 games. You can't do it.
That's
In
not
3 or
bad.
4 years, he's a play. In 3 or 4 years, he's Udonis Haslam.
It could
He's
be.
just
Yeah,
a player coach.
Yeah, no doubt. All right, guys, I'll leave this to you. Thanks for Lewis for running point as always. Make sure, since we got him on here, if you're watching on here, playback tomorrow night 8:00, right? Playback 8:00 tomorrow night. So for those of you who don't check out playback, go to playback.tv/5RSN and check out the Inside Leverage crew. Thanks, guys.
Thanks,
All
Ethan.
right, thank you, Ethan.
Thanks, Ethan.
All right, Eric, you've been too quiet, man. I don't even think I've given you a chance to officially talk. So here you go, man. It is your time. Speak.
Well, I feel like the Jordan Brooks signing was kind of that was meditation for Dolphins fans. Everybody kind of mellows out, relaxes now, kind of gets settled in. All right, now that bought a lot of patience just now, especially at that number at 3 years, 26.25. That's actually really good value for the caliber of linebacker that you're getting, considering Jerome Baker was going to be making about $12 million this year, and he's kind of viewed as an upgrade over Jerome Baker by many. I tend to agree with a lot of the sentiment here. I mean, truth be told, they will probably look a little bit worse on paper compared to this season at the start of next year. But I think right now, ultimately what you want to do, and I think to Chad's point about the edge rushers and kind of hoping that they just get back to who they were, especially, kind of leading up to their injuries. It's really was really unfortunate timing with Bradley Chubb and Jalen Phillips. How those guys kind of felt like they were just turning the corner right when they got hurt. But those are going to be like mid-season additions for this team. So you're really looking at right now. I think the biggest thing with this Dolphins team that we're looking at here is kind of a change in identity just a little bit, especially on the defensive side of the football. You saw it a little bit last year when them finally bringing in David Long in what felt like the first time in forever that they kind of addressed the linebacker position. And they're continuing to do that this year. They kind of want to, I think, at least defensively with the Anthony Weaver scheme, they want to build that defense from the middle on outwards. And I think that you look around the league and you look at the 49ers with Fred Warner, you look at the Ravens, what they had with Patrick Queen and with Roquan Smith, and you look at the Chiefs, what they had in the middle with their linebacking core with Nick Bolton. I think that the Dolphins are looking at that and they're saying we need to get better in those positions. And I think that the pass rush will ultimately take care of itself. I mean, I know that you lost Christian Wilkins, but once you get back a Bradley Chubb and I almost said Jordan Phillips, goodness, Jalen Phillips, you're going to see a much improved pass rush, especially Zach Sealer. I mean, we're forgetting that, and I know Lewis is going to point out that he was playing next to Christian Wilkins last year, and
vice versa. I'm not dismissing the fact that Christian Wilkins. I'm not going to dismiss that Christian Wilkins benefited from having Zach Sealer next to him. But by the same token, because I had people telling me it's like, oh, the only reason that Christian Wilkins is any good because Zach Sealer is next to him. Well, how do you know that Zach Sealer was any good without Christian Wilkins next to him? They've been together all this time, man. And now we're going to see him.
I'm just here to point out that technically speaking, Zach Sealer did have the most sacks along the defensive line last year. And that does include Christian Wilkins. Not to say that I think he's better than Christian Wilkins. I think Christian Wilkins is the more well-rounded player. The one thing that I do see with this Dolphins team heading into next year is I do see them bargain bin shopping along the offensive line again, which I know a lot of people are going to kind of roll their eyes at. But it's just where they are with this team. I think to Chad's point, Connor Williams is,
Which
I would
Chad,
say
Eric?
at this point, Chad R.
Chad R.
Yeah.
Okay.
I was talking about Connor Williams too.
Yeah, I think to his point, Connor Williams, because of the fact you kind of read the tea leaves with his agent saying that it's likely he signs later in the offseason. they're going to get that money post June 1st from the Xavier Howard cut. I think that's more than likely where the Dolphins are going to go at that position. Isaiah Wynn, I think, is a guy that we will see come back at this point. I mean, he for all the injuries that he had last year, when he did play, he was pretty solid, and he's going to come really cheap. So, ultimately, I think this is setting up for kind of there's going to be a big time focus on the draft. If Chris Greer hits on his first 2 picks this year, the first rounder and the second rounder, and those guys are big time contributors, then I don't think you see much of a drop off in the Dolphins this year. But it's kind of been an up and down draft history. And so, you need contributors right away, rounds 1 and 2 this year. And that's more important than ever.
One of the questions in the chat is asking straight up if we overpaid for Jordan Brooks. Based on the way that the contract is structured, the answer I feel like is no. I'm seeing a lot of clips coming up on Twitter of what Jordan Brooks is capable of, and there were a lot of, let me put it this way, there are a lot of Seahawks fans that are screaming to the heavens on why the Seahawks allowed him to leave, and especially at the price that he's actually leaving at. So this is a very David Long-ish kind of move where it's like we got a really good player at a bargain deal. So I'll give credit to Chris Greer. He's been able to get some really good linebackers at his bargain price. And I'll also mention this really quickly because we're talking about Brooks as an upgrade to Baker. We keep hearing this concept of, we've heard this a couple times, is that Jerome Baker leaving Miami, and they were discussing a pay cut and whatever, and they ultimately couldn't come to terms. And so Baker went to the open market, and the injury had something to do with it. I'm honestly not going to rule out yet that Baker might not actually come back to Miami to begin with. It depends on what his market ends up being.
I think this makes it less likely, but yeah, it's possible.
I mean, they may try to.
Is there any room left in the linebacker room at this point between Anthony Walker and David Long and Jordan Brooks now? He's going to want playing time. I don't think
hasta la bye-bye, Duke Riley.
No love for Tyndall?
Tyndall's good on the team. I do, man. The guy's a great athlete.
The Dolphins clearly don't. I mean, these signings tell you right away that the Dolphins are not sold on Tyndall because there's a guy that we talked about. We need our draft picks to do something. There's a draft pick, 3rd year, and they're out signing more linebackers. I mean, clearly they just don't have faith in Tyndall. You could look to see him. Obviously, he'll be on the roster, but, I mean, look to see him even possibly not making the 53 this year.
Yeah, it's possible. I would imagine he'll be a special teamer. That's probably where he'll fall
I think that Channing Tyndall will be on the team, and the one who's not making it is Duke Riley. Because they can save about $2.5 million by cutting Duke Riley, and Tyndall is on a rookie contract.
I would say in general, most of the players I wouldn't feel too safe because we just got a new defensive coordinator. And these moves aren't Chris Greer as much as it is, Weaver. He's not. He's the one who's kind of wanting these players. He's the one who probably made that call on wanting to switch the linebackers out and stuff like that. So, I think Duke Riley's a cool guy, like watching him on Hard Knocks, but gosh, watching him get burned by Justice Hill over and over in that Ravens game was painful. So we need faster linebackers than Duke Riley, unfortunately.
Well, Jordan Brooks fits that mold. That's 100% for sure. Some other stuff that's going on, and I want to talk about this quickly. There are some comments talking about this. Aaron Anders in the chat talked about extending Waddle and Phillips and Holland. I've been on this train for a few days now, and the more that I think about it, the more I'm kind of warming up to the whole idea, and I want to hear your thoughts on this. I'll start with you, Mr. Caniff. Quite frankly, I want to extend Jalen Waddle. I want to extend Jalen Phillips. But when it comes to Javon Holland specifically, every single year we see this happen. There's like a mass exodus of really good safeties that just go out and have to test the open market because for whatever reason, safety is just not considered a very important position. And if I'm Miami right now, I'm looking at Javon Holland and saying, prove yourself to me, because last year you got hurt and then you went cuckoo for Cocoa Puffs. I don't know what the heck happened to him, but all of a sudden he's like a tweeting machine. What happened after he got hurt? He got bored and decided he wanted to become a social media mogul. But I'm looking at Javon Holland and I'm saying, prove to me that you are so much better that we should extend you and give you a big paycheck rather than getting any number of veteran safeties that are inevitably going to get cut this upcoming season.
I feel like we don't need to worry about any extensions that don't help us fiscally this year since we're so tight. We have so much work to do. We have an unknown amount of money because of, like you mentioned, the Armstead restructure. But, the only extension I'm really wondering right now, and I just don't think they can do anything real until they figure out what they're doing with Tua when it comes to extensions beyond this year for Waddle, for Holland, or anybody else. JP's going to come up. You got to figure out what you're paying Tua, what that looks like. And I've heard nothing from the inside. People like to throw out a lot of fake tweets. We've heard nothing from the inside. Even the guys we listen to that'll drop a little nugget here and there. There have been no nuggets on that conversation and what that looks like. We have
Tua?
No clue what that contract's going to be like. But
the Tua contract,
50 plus.
Yeah, that's the only nugget, 50 plus.
Yeah, exactly. So that's just where we are. And until that happens, I can't even think about Holland and Waddle and some of these other draft picks that we picked 3 in the last 3 or 4 years that we're looking to extend so we don't end up losing some of them like we lost Wilkins.
Yeah, this is my biggest issue is here's the Tua thing is just kind of it's in limbo. We keep hearing over and over again that we're not going to see anything about Tua until the spring, like when training camp opens up. So that's the main issue I have right now with Tua. If we're going to wait that long to extend him, then don't expect to have any money saved anytime soon with him. So now,
I just want to point one thing out, Douglas, because people do this a lot. I see this on Twitter. Is like, oh, Chris Greer didn't get Andrew Van Ginkel's side. He didn't, but we really don't know. Like, Andrew Van Ginkel went back to Flores. He went back to the north. He's from Wisconsin, playing college there. They don't necessarily know where the other side's at. And I think there's a big leverage game going on with Tua right now. And Tua's leverage is the highest right now coming into free agency because if he signs, they can structure his deal to free up maybe 10 to 15 million even in cap space by giving him like a bonus and spreading it out over like 5-6 years. Here's the thing though with Tua, that as we travel through free agency and you get through the draft and stuff, Tua is going to start to get a little nervous in his agent that Miami will just let him play out his 5th year contract at $23 million. And again, where the player bets on themselves. If you're Tua Tagovailoa right now, and let's say Miami's got $100 million on the table guaranteed in your contract, with his history, like with if he has a serious concussion this coming season, and he's just playing at $23 million, he's going to lose all of that money. And so this is a different leverage game than you're playing with somebody like Christian Wilkins, who I don't know if Wilkins was ever hurt in his career that I'm aware of. And so it's a little easier maybe for him to bet on himself. If I'm personally Tua and I'm thinking about my family and me, I would not be very excited to play one more season under $23 million.
I don't think he'd do it, to be honest with you. We love Tua, but I think that's one he sits out.
So he can't sit. I mean, if he doesn't sit out, then he doesn't. He's not going to sit it out. But I'm just saying, I think what the Dolphins are doing is they realize that the longer you go into offseason, the more Tua might be a little more willing to work with you a little bit on a contract right now. So I think that's what's going on is the timing. I think they have, in general, the $50 million. Yeah, he's going to get $50 million a year. That doesn't really matter. What matters is how much is guaranteed, how much is a signing bonus, and when are those payments coming out? And if I'd pay Tua $60 million if it means like in 3 years, at like $70 million, you could move on from him if it's not working out. That's what the agent and him are working at right now. Is I'm sure they're trying to up the amount of guaranteed money right now, and that's a really tough choice right now for the Dolphins because if you put say 100 or 150 million guaranteed into Tua, and he has a severe concussion a week into the season, you not only probably ruined this season, you've probably ruined where you're like a Denver Broncos situation where you've got a huge amount of money into a guy that might not be able to play. And so I imagine there's languages going on about injury guarantees and all that kind of stuff right now. And so I would bet you that Tua contract ends up going all the way into July or even June to July before they settle on what they're going to do.
Breaking news: the Dolphins agreed to Eli Apple.
That is not real. That's a troll.
I was wondering.
I'm just hanging up if that's real, man.
It's not real. I was wondering if I could get anybody to flinch. But yeah, if that really did happen, I think I would probably lose.
So with the extensions, though, you do have the 5th-year options with a Waddle and with Jalen Phillips. With the Javon Holland as the 2nd-round pick, you don't have that same luxury. So I think he's looking at it the same way with that, that security. Even a player like Christian Wilkins, I believe there was talk that he took out some insurance just in case. So I think these players are all thinking about their futures and wanting to kind of secure that long-term deal. So some of these guys may not be as patient as others. So I think you have to balance Tua's negotiations while also keeping in mind the other guys on your team who could be looking to get paid and seeking some of that same security. So it's a balancing act in the front office for sure.
I honestly think the Holland extension's coming after June when the money hits. It's a great time to do it for the Dolphins. His contract, he's a 2nd-round pick, right, Holland?
Yeah.
So he's not probably getting. I haven't looked at his contract, but he's not made that much money as in his whole career, I would imagine, as a pro. So I don't know how, especially coming off an injury. He's probably thinking, man, what if I had ruptured my Achilles? I haven't hardly made any money in my career, and the safety market is awful right now. If you're a safety, if you're looking at the names out there, and so I would, at his age and his talent level, this would be a great year to extend Holland. I would, even though there's so many safeties out there, I'd love to be that they would get that done in the offseason personally.
I mean, quite frankly, I keep saying it. I'm not stressing re-signing Javon Holland at all. At all. Like the only way that I bring back Javon Holland, like he's not my priority. He's not going to be my priority no matter what. Jalen Waddle is a priority. Jalen Phillips is a priority. Javon Holland, I'm sorry. Like I love the guy. He's a safety. And I've given up on the whole safeties are the most important player on the field thing to this point. Rashad Jones. Well, I remember when Rashad Jones was around and we were like, we got to bring back Rashad Jones. Look how many interceptions he gets. Look how many plays he makes. I'm not into it anymore. With safeties, there's a bunch of really good safeties that were just too expensive, too rich for the team's blood. And they decided, you know what? We'll let you walk and go find a home somewhere else. And you guys can float around the league for the next several years. And by the way, I also want to point this out. As soon as Jalen Ramsey reaches the point where he's not a lockdown corner anymore, we can turn him into Charles Woodson and he can be a lockdown safety. So that's the end of that discussion. So we don't even have to worry about that at that point.
I'm not worried. He looked pretty damn good to me. Like he's the best I've ever seen. But to that point, I understand what you're saying positionally, but the other Chad is making the point you don't have to extend Waddle or Phillips right now because they have another year after the coming year. That's because they're 1st-round picks. They have that option year. And so this is it for Holland. This is his final year. After this, unless you take him, he's a full free agent. And so if you're going to do a deal, you're looking at it from the player side. You would typically take a little less money right now rather than risk another year in injury. Whereas if you don't pay Holland now and you go another full season, he's going to take the highest bidder, and that very well may not be Miami next year. You just have to realize that.
So I got a lot of comments coming in, a lot of them talking about Holland, 60 tackles, 1 interception. Whoopee, that's not all that impressive. Cap for Life wants us to say rebuild, that this is what it actually is. We're rebuilding again. I won't say that. I refuse to say that because it's not true. No, wait, as much as we gripe and whine and talk about how we don't want to we're not happy with how everything is going, it's not a rebuild. And True Blazer is asking, what makes you think Ramsey will want to be here long term? Not saying he won't, because we're paying him a lot of money, and he wanted to come here.
He agreed to the conversion today to kind of help get the team under the cap. I don't
wanted
think
to be
that's
in Miami.
That's going to ask out, this offseason. That's, the fact that he's willing to work with the team on the contract like that, kind of, you can kind of infer that he's going to be on the roster for at least this year. Who knows what happens? Obviously, things go sideways this year. All bets are off for anybody on the roster going forward. I think that's pretty much well known. But the other thing that I did want to touch on is I think that this, so far in free agency, addressing linebacker, addressing tight end, the Dolphins are set up to really attack the trenches in the draft this year with those first and second round picks. And say what you want about Chris Greer and his drafting along the offensive line. He hasn't, considering Christian Wilkins was kind of his only first round pick along the defensive line. If they do go that defensive lineman route again, round one, not saying that Chris Greer is going to hit on a Christian Wilkins caliber player, but if you can draft a guy in the first round who gives you 85% of what Christian Wilkins was, that is a massive win at the price that you're going to be paying for that player.
Exactly, yeah.
Well, here's my thing. If I'm going to go into the trenches, I need to be on the offensive line. I mean that with all my heart and soul. Either Miami needs to find a way to make enough money to get under the cap to where they can get the likes of Laken Tomlinson and have him play guard. Because if their plan is legitimately Isaiah Wynn and Robert Jones as your interior lineman, and then in June a hobbled Connor Williams and then Liam Eichenberg to hold down the fort until then, I think I might lose my mind. I am not okay with that offensive line. I need guys who can play well, not guys who might play well. At the Robert Jones has some, keyword some, and I say that very loosely, some potential, but not a lot. If it's anybody who I feel like has the most potential out of anybody who's a young player on this whole roster, Jonnu Smith, who is a left tackle exclusively for all we know at the moment. But we just had Teron Armstead restructure. I'm hoping, again, we haven't seen the numbers yet, and I'm very curious as to why we're dragging our heels on seeing why the numbers are being held out. I want to see that Armstead contract. I need to see what's going on there. So with Teron Armstead, if we can move on from him next season, and I mentioned this during the last episode of Pulse, is that Jonnu Smith, out of all the players that are young players, he showed the most promise. When Kendall Lamb got injured, Jonnu Smith had to step in, and it was seamless. It was beautiful. The fact that this kid came out of nowhere and was able to ball out, and he continued to play well in spite of the fact that he was basically the third string guy. I want to see what Jonnu Smith can do. Now, that takes care of left tackle, but I still need guards. And that's the one thing that I feel like the Dolphins are not paying attention to. Jets gang, we got some Jets fans in here. Talking about Laken isn't good. That's why the Jets cut him. Okay, Laken wasn't good for you guys with the Jets, but with the 49ers, which is why he made his money to begin with, Laken Tomlinson was really good. And the blocking scheme that the Dolphins put out there is exactly that blocking scheme. It's basically the 49ers blocking scheme all over again. So if there was ever a chance for Laken Tomlinson to prove himself again, it would be in Miami with Mike McDaniel, because it's the exact same scheme that he made a name for himself. So I'm willing to give a shot on that. Somebody's asking, where was the Lionel Perez asking, do you think the Finns will be looking for a tight end this season? They already got one. Ron, I'll ask you about the Jonnu Smith signing. What was your initial impression on that?
What I love about that is it's a true addition. I mean, we saw a bunch of subtractions today, obviously, and there's more to come still. We saw free agents that they are free agents just because they haven't signed with somebody yet. Doesn't mean we're not going to lose them. But that was a true addition. I mean, now we take our tight end 1. He becomes tight end 2, Smythe, where he belongs. And he's more experienced, and he ran a few more routes, so he's a little bit better and whatnot. And then we get ourselves a tight end who can block, who can absolutely run routes and catch the ball. It's something that was missing from this team, this offense, the last 2 years, really. Now, I don't want to get overexcited about him. It's his 4th team in 5 years. But I think he fits. We didn't pay him a ton. He fits nicely with the offense. He should, and he can do some of the things McDaniel's been needing from a tight end since he's been here. So I thought it was a good signing.
See, now here's where I get some comments here. So Lo-Fi is talking about you don't get Jonnu Smith because of the blocking. He's basically Gesicki again. So
no, he's not.
But he can block, so no, he's not. That's not.
I mean, Gesicki cannot block. Like,
okay, but
Jonnu
here's
Smith's
the thing.
not like an inline tight end, but he's significantly better than Mike.
Well, I mean, the biggest thing is, Jonnu Smith has the capability to break a couple tackles after a catch. I think Mike Gesicki broke one tackle in the last 2 seasons, according to the numbers. Jonnu Smith is consistently one of the best tight ends in the league, according to run after the catch or yards after catch, and that's a big thing in this system with Mike McDaniel. So, I mean, I'm not too concerned about the blocking when you have a guy like Durham Smythe already on the roster. And then you have Julian Hill, who did grade out as a pretty good blocker as your third tight end. I wouldn't be really concerned about the blocking there anyways at the tight end spot. I think that they've got a couple other guys there that are already pretty competent in that department.
So Jets gang talking about still Laken Tomlinson. Now here's the thing. I understand where they're coming from. Laken Tomlinson was bad last season. There's no question about it. He was bad. But this is where the ability of a coach can come into play. He mentions how the 49ers coaches were all with the Jets. But here's the thing. Mike McDaniel was in Miami. And Mike McDaniel, with that run game and all that, he was the run game coordinator. He was the one in charge of like the blocking schemes and stuff like that. All that is McDaniel, the offensive side of things. So I don't know if the Dolphins have any interest in Laken Tomlinson. I'm saying that if we're going to bring in veteran guards to compete, I would rather give Tomlinson a shot because at least he was familiar with McDaniel and how things work and how it's supposed to be, than once again trusting in Isaiah Wynn, who might be good and might stay healthy, but probably won't. And I'm just not buying that. Welch is in the chat talking about, can we take a moment to laugh at the Patriots fan who tried to dunk on us after signing Devontae Parker, who is, by the way, Devontae Parker was cut by the Patriots this offseason. So he is no longer a New England Patriot. He is now a free agent. So yeah, okay, sure.
He did hit an NFL milestone though, guys. Like, I just don't want to dismiss him completely. He managed to be the first wide receiver since the stat has been tracked to finish last in separation among all wide receivers 4 seasons in a row. I just think we got to give this guy his due. Congratulations, because your ass must have been trying to be that bad.
No, his hamstrings are done. They've been done for a few years, sadly.
Devontae Parker is a go up and get it wide receiver. That is what he is. That is what he has always been. That's what he does.
He's slowed down too. It's hard to get separation if you're slowing down a little.
I'll be surprised if he's even on an NFL roster come.
He's kind of at the end
come September. You know, like once the cuts happen, he'll probably be in somebody's camp, but I don't think he'll end up on a team.
Listen, we went out there and we gave a 5th round pick to the Bears for Chase Claypool because he's a big body and he had talent. If I'm Miami, and I'm being dead serious, I'd have Devontae Parker as my 6th wide receiver.
No, there's no point. You got to pay him.
My sixth wide receiver, not even that.
But he's never.
We've got Omar Kelly, who, by the way, is an affiliate with the 5 Reasons Sports Network now. He's advocating to go get Jarvis Landry back, man.
I mean,
at least
the problem with these guys is the bottom part of the roster at the receiver position are special teamers, and you don't want those guys on special teams. Now, if you wanted to re-sign Claypool as your 6th, sure, I'd take him because he's younger, more athletic. He'll have a full off season.
He has
in
no
the system.
brain, Duke.
Yeah, but I mean, again, you're signing him as the 6th wide receiver. Devontae Parker doesn't have it physically, so you're asking. I mean, he's either going to sit the bench or he's just taking up space. He's not going to play special teams. So no thanks. Same with Jarvis Landry. He's not, you need these guys to play special teams. And so, yeah, re-sign River Craycraft or whoever. Just, no to Parker, no to Landry.
I'd like to get Barrios back. I mean, I know he. A lot of people think, oh, he's not any good. Let me ask you, how many games did we almost lose because of a muffed punt? Or how many games did we have the punt return where he should have let it go in the end zone, but he catches it on the 3? He knows what he's doing, and I'll take a guy who doesn't muff a punt or field the kick wrong over a guy that runs a kickback. Right? I mean, you want Jakeem Grant, great. How many muffed punts did Jakeem Grant have on the team that cost games for that one return that he gets? He, to me, somebody like Barrios is way more valuable than Devontae Parker because he's filling your special teams roles out. But I don't know if we'll get him back or not. But
I mean, I get where you're coming from, Chad. I do, but the whole Braxton Berrios thing makes me. He already proved, like, we tried to turn him into an X receiver. He's a slot. That's all he's good for. And by the way, for what Berrios does, he's not. Like we keep talking about, oh, they add speed. Berrios didn't feel like he was that fast. He really didn't. And so his separation skills were minimal. And I get that we're comparing him to the likes of Tyreek Hill and Jalen Waddle, who they're track guys. But Berrios was not open nearly as often as he needed to be. And if you want Berrios to come open, you need to give him more time to do so than 2 seconds.
I wouldn't expect him to play that many snaps. I don't think he did either way.
Can you pick Olivia up? She called.
So I'm looking at it from the situation of, if I'm Miami, my first priority above all else is they have to fix that offensive line. Because if you want other receivers to actually contribute to the offense besides Tyreek and Waddle, you can't expect them to be open in 2 seconds or less, and Tua's going to hit them on the first read. You need to give Tua time to actually analyze the field and look around for a guy who's going to be open, or at least be able to throw to a spot, because he knows that the guy's not going to get there as quickly as the likes of Tyreek and Waddle. The fact that the offense was structured and designed in such a way that if you don't have the ball out in 2 seconds, there's a very good chance that Tua is going to have to do something crazy to be able to get it out to the receiver. That's a problem, and that's, I think, is a flaw that McDaniel has to fix. I've even got the Jets guy saying Berrios is trash. This from when he was during his time with the Jets. So,
but a lot of the points you're making for me is why I advocate for the Dolphins personally looking at the wide receiver position in the draft. I know it's a free agency thing, but I think if you're planning to allocate $50 million plus to a Jalen Waddle and a Tyreek Hill, there isn't a lot of room to go out in free agency and get a $7 to $8 million wide receiver we had in the past with a Cedric Wilson. So you may need to consider getting someone at some point in the draft, whether a Ricky Pearsall, a Ladd McConkey, a Malik Washington, a Javon Baker, somewhere in the draft. You could add something there to give you something solid on a rookie contract with some high upside, because I don't think you're going to be able to do too much at that position to add significant value. Like, I just think that you may have to consider potentially drafting a guy at that position.
I tend to agree, just because of how deep wide receiver is this year in the draft, and that's ultimately why we haven't seen a lot of movement in the wide receiver market in free agency, I believe. But I mean, I'm going to put this out there. There is a non-zero chance that Mike McDaniel hijacks the draft pick and takes Xavier Worthy at 21. I mostly joking there.
I mean, listen, he literally came out and said that in a perfect world, he would be used like Tyreek, but he wants to go to the Chiefs. He made that clear. He wants to go to Kansas City. I don't know how he feels about that.
I mean, I'm sure he would not be upset at playing with Tyreek. I don't think that would be the case. I mean, the speed between him, Waddle, HN, and Tyreek would be insane. But ultimately, I do think you have to go for you have to play it smart. You have to go offensive line. You have to go defensive line too. I think if we're reading the tea leaves, that's kind of where this is going to head is, I look back at I'm looking at the positions that the Dolphins still need to fill, and you're looking at safety, you're looking at corner. I think the edge rushers are going to be filled by bargain bin guys. And looking at the safety position, I think you're going to get another Deshaun Elliott-esque signing. Deshaun Elliott, for as much as we all want to bring him back at we want to bring him back at 4 times what we signed him for. This was a guy that they signed on a 1-year deal for $1.7 million last year. I'm sure that I think they replicate that kind of signing again this year and aren't that much worse off for it. And then cornerback, I think they still address it at some point this year. I know Chris Greer places a lot of value on that position, especially in the modern NFL. You're going to be looking at a situation where, this team is going to be set up to where the only holes come draft. Well, not the only holes come draft time, but the most glaring holes come draft time are going to be up front. And I think that that's ultimately where the tea leaves kind of lead you to believe that that's where they're going to emphasize in the draft. Is both sides of the ball, whether it's defense in the first round, offensive line in the second round. That's what I think we're ultimately headed towards. Maybe a wide receiver in the mid rounds, 5th, 6th, whatever.
So I'm going to bring this up because there's a debate going on in the chat right now between a few guys talking about Tua Tagovailoa. Yeah, we're going back to quarterback because what else is new? So the discussion is about Cap for Life talks about how Miami needs to get a jump ball receiver. And the discussion being had is that Tua lacks touch. Jump balls is something that requires touch. I do not agree with that at all. Accuracy is part of having touch. Like if Tua has elite level accuracy, then yes, he has touch. Now, what I will say is that does Tua throw jump balls? The answer to that question is no, he doesn't. And again, that's all part of because that's how the offense is predicated. They're not throwing up jump balls most of the time, unless it's in the end zone for some reason. They just love
those
that
fades.
fade. I don't get that. That I don't understand. I would really rather prefer they get a jump ball receiver, if only because if you're going to throw those fades into the end zone, I want somebody big to go up and get it.
Yeah, I mean that's all it is. If you want to throw those corner fades, which clearly Tua can throw. You just need a little bit more advantage there in height and a guy that can go up a little bit and not make it such a difficult throw. That is such a difficult throw to Tyreek. It just is, as good as Tyreek is. That is, you have to be beyond perfect with the throw. And even we saw there was a few times where Tua was perfect and it still didn't, it didn't come down with it. That's just Tyreek can do a lot, but that's not his specialty. They were just lacking the guy to do it. So I just don't know if it's worth, quote unquote, going to get a guy just for that occasional throw. I think they just need to eliminate it from the playbook, if you ask me.
I'm gonna bring up a name that's already been mentioned, Jonnu Smith. I mean, other teams use the tight ends in the red zone. I remember Armando used to tweet that all the time. He'd tweet, "Who catches touchdowns in the red zone?" Miami just doesn't target the tight ends in the red zone, but you've got Durham Smythe, who's not really a big-time receiving threat. You had Julian Hill, who was an undrafted rookie last year. They've got Jonnu Smith, and you still got Durham Smythe, and you hopefully have some development from Julian Hill. So why not have a third of those guys in the red zone?
I wonder if Ezekiel will be back this coming year. I still don't know.
He will. He's already busting his tail. We've seen videos over and over again. He'll be back.
Yeah,
and to be fair, the red zone, you did have. I'm sorry. Go ahead.
Ron, you first.
No, I was just gonna say we really haven't gotten to see everything he can do, and he may not really develop like we hope, but he's another one too. I just feel like I agree too with Duke. He popped in my head, Jonnu Smith, as well, especially maybe more in the back of the end zone rather than that fade route, but just a guy that can kind of go up and get the ball. But excuse me, Tua does throw jump balls. I see him throw jump balls to Tyreek and Waddle in the middle of the field like a ton. So he does throw them, but I get the person.
Okay, but hold on. But that's kind of splitting hairs on the definition of jump ball.
Jump balls. I think what this guy's talking about is just that
contested balls.
Get it over the top throw on the sideline. Well, Miami just hasn't had the receiver for Tua to be able to do that. Tua could absolutely make that throw, of course.
No, go ahead, Chad from Inside Leverage.
No, I was going to say, to be fair, about the red zone numbers, about the lack of tight end production, I think it's valid, but I do think that Raheem Mostert's 20-plus touchdowns down there may have slightly impacted some touchdown production down there in general for more than one guy. So I think that, if you didn't have possibly a guy who rushed for 20, 21, 22 touchdowns last year, you may have seen, 3 to 4 or 5 touchdowns to a tight end.
That's a fair point. That's an unusual amount to go to one player. That doesn't happen every year.
All right. So it looks like things are starting to tamp down a little bit. And I mean, I'll say this. We're still seeing a lot of offensive linemen getting signed to big contracts. Patriots re-signed Michael Onwenu to 3 years, $57 million. So I know that Josh Allen got his...
He plays tackle also. So he got less than Hunt, even though he plays a higher premium position.
But Hunt is like we're talking. Like there was somebody who said something earlier saying that Hunt is not an elite guard. I don't agree with that. Hunt is by far the best offensive lineman Miami's had over the past several years. Hunt is a stud of a guard, and I guarantee you we're going to see a lot better Bryce Young now that Hunt is there to help protect him. So
Bryce Young's going to have somebody to throw to.
That's what the draft is for. There are plenty of options.
Yeah, they don't have a first round pick.
They can get Xavier Worthy then.
I think he goes before that, but
you think so? What do you
I think he gets picked around the 21st spot.
I don't know. I feel like the fact that he's very small might work against him. They'll probably see when the draft starts and we get all these player comparisons. I am positive that Xavier Worthy is going to be compared to Tyreek Hill. That's going to be the side by side comparison for him. But
I think it'll be John Ross just because he broke John Ross's record. And but as far as the draft goes, and I will have plenty of time between now and then to discuss that. But a name I want to throw out, and to Eric's point, a name for Dolphins fans to probably get used to is Graham Barton, offensive lineman from Duke, can legitimately play all 5 positions on the offensive line. He's a guy I've had my eye on. I watched a couple of games of his this year. If there was ever a player that would fit what Miami wants to do in terms of having...
Breaking news, Duke. I'm sorry to interrupt. Dolphins have agreed to terms with their new center, Titans center Aaron Brewer, 3 years, $21 million. So that's a $7 million per year. Aaron Brewer from the Titans going to Miami.
So the JPJ dream is
it's dead.
As well as a Connor Williams reunion, probably.
I mean, Connor Williams can still come back. He can play guard. I'm good with that.
Yeah, he was a better guard.
I'm going to say this. Yeah, I think Brewer can play guard, but the Titans had one of the worst offensive lines in the league last year. I don't think signing a player from that line is positive.
Yeah, I don't think we can simplify it quite like that. That if a team had a bad O-line, that means every player on that O-line was bad. They could also have bad scheme. When you have one good lineman, that does not help. It may still gives you a bad O-line. We've seen that. We've seen where we've had good O-linemen before, but the rest of it was bad. It just made the whole thing bad. I don't necessarily think that just because their O-line was bad, that signing somebody from that O-line is a bad signing.
Especially if their left guard and right guard weren't up to par, you would expect that meant that, the center maybe had to compensate for them at times. Now, I'm sure there's a lot of context. I'm not saying it's a home run or any of that, because I personally want to dig more on Brewer, but there could be a lot of context for why he isn't viewed in the light of some of these top guys as far as his performance the last season. But I think if the Dolphins have elected to go in that direction, they probably view him as an athletic guy who can, contribute in some way, shape, or form on the interior. So we'll see how that goes.
Better than Eichenberg at center.
I can bet that for sure.
Oh, that's a high bar.
That's what we went into the playoffs with. So let's take it.
I mean, I guess you can say that. Aaron Andrews asking, what's the best signing today and the toughest loss from the Dolphins? Oh, I mean, I feel like we're all unanimous on this one. Best signing today, Jordan Brooks. Worst loss, Christian Wilkins.
I'm going to go with Van Ginkel.
Okay, I take back what I said about unanimous.
And the reason is what we've pointed out is the fact that we've got our two edge guys that we're expecting to be our starters are injured, coming back from catastrophic injuries, and the rest are guys are probably never even heard of. We don't really have a quality edge player, and for what he signed for, it wasn't a massive deal compared to like what Hunt and Wilkins. Wilkins is the best of the three that we lost. Wilkins is the best player. Before counting Brandon Jones, Wilkins is the best player, but I think most people are like, yeah, we're good letting him go somewhere else for that kind of money. What was it? Van Ginkel's like $10 million a year for a couple-year deal. I mean, that's good money for an edge rusher, particularly one as productive as he was. So I would have liked for them to have found some money to bring him back. Because it wasn't just that he was like a fan favorite. I mean, he was very productive when he was on the field, and just.
I would like to point out, just for everybody kind of having an idea, for what it's worth, Chris Kaufman of the 3 yards per carry crew, he really likes Aaron Brewer. So make of that what you will. I'm still hoping, though. Go ahead.
I mean, maybe I'm wrong. I'm going to remain skeptical when it comes to the offensive line. So.
I mean, I'm going to go ahead and say that maybe there's hope. I mean, if at least one of the guys at 3YPC likes him, maybe there's a reason for that. If anybody has dug into it, I'm going to go ahead and trust them on that for now. Let's go ahead and I don't know. I almost feel like that if we end up calling it a night, that the Dolphins are going to do something crazy, and we're not going to be here to discuss it. Of course, we'll always have Pulse of Fins Nation, the official episode tomorrow. We can talk about this stuff.
Well, I'll just give you my wrap it up words for the night, whether we're ending or not. I heard a lot of Dolphins fans in here tonight with a whole bunch of revisionist history on some of the players we lost, and a whole lot of trying to set yourself up for, oh, this player wasn't that good, that player wasn't that good. You know what? Just because your new girl doesn't make you take her to the chart house and let you take her to Red Lobster doesn't really mean she's a better girlfriend. Just saying, guys. I think when the season comes down to it, we are going to sorely miss some of these players we could not re-sign. That's just my feeling on it. And I know the Dolphins fans are going to talk themselves into it until the minute they realize, yeah, we miss Wilkins. And I agree, especially going to miss Van Ginkel, with the fact is we don't even have an edge rusher right now because of the injury situation. But I think Wilkins is going to be a big miss. That is not a guy you just go out and just replace.
I wonder, I'm not sure about this, and I feel like somebody needs to help me out and maybe look it up, or maybe you guys know. Does re-signing your own free agents have an effect on the compensatory formula?
No,
it doesn't.
Well, it does in the fact that you're not going to gain one if you re-sign that player. Like if we signed Wilkins, then we couldn't even have an opportunity to get that third round compensatory pick, right?
No, I get what you're saying there, but I'm talking about.
No, it doesn't take away like, oh, you lost this guy, but you re-signed this guy, so that balances out. No, that's not how that works. When you re-sign your own guys, it doesn't affect it.
Okay, so we need pass rush, right? We can bring Melvin Ingram back again.
I don't know. Maybe he'll be a better fit for the defense more than Fangio thought he was going to be, apparently. I don't know.
And to go along with the comp pick formula, players that are released prior to their contract do not count against the comp pick formula.
Right.
So
which means Aaron Brewer does not count against the comp pick.
I believe Jonnu Smith was released, correct? He was not his contract wasn't
correct.
So that doesn't go against the and I think because I remember the Patriots did this several years ago. I think they either traded for or picked up Darrelle Revis, and then he left after that one season, and they got a comp pick for him because they acquired him in a way that was not pertinent to the formula. So I don't know about. I guess the two linebackers they signed were free agents that were their contracts were up, but Jonnu Smith was not one, and I don't know about Brewer.
But I don't think Anthony Walker is gonna really harm them in terms of the comp.
No, they're not going to do anything because those guys aren't making the big contract. I mean, nothing that they have done today or probably this entire offseason will really go against the contracts that were signed by the major three losses today. You got to figure $20 million a year to Robert Hunt that's a comp pick if nothing else happens. Christian Wilkins is absolutely a comp pick. So there's plenty of room for that. Now I'll go along with Ron's statement. I mean, would you rather have the player or the third round pick that you're going to get at the end of the third round with that comp pick? But again, if you can't sign those players, at least try to get something for it.
I mean, ultimately, so the Dolphins, they bring in, what ended up being, I guess, probably a little bit more of a so-so day in terms of additions, subtractions from the overall team. They didn't really. They ended up, by the end of the stream at least, adding a decent amount of talent back to the roster between Brewer and Jordan Brooks. I think ultimately what you're looking at here is now kind of all bets are off as what that first round pick could be. I've even started to see them get mocked edge rushers, and I know that that Chad Rodenbaum didn't think that they're going to go edge, considering how much that they already have tied up between Bradley Chubb and Jalen Phillips. But ultimately, edge rushers are one of those positions where you can just never have enough talent. And so I don't think that's off limits for them in the first round this year. Adding Brewer kind of frees them up to do a little bit more in the first round, whether it is, I don't know, for some reason, adding another wide receiver, if that's what they decide that they want to do, or, drafting a corner to replace Xavier Howard. The Dolphins are at least now in a decent position to set up to where they can truly go best player available and not necessarily worry too much about depth or about drafting need too much. I still think Connor Williams is an option considering his work at guard. Ultimately, this is a team that, you're going to be looking at patchwork at a few positions. I think edge rusher could end up being patchwork. It's kind of like edge rushers in football are kind of like relievers in baseball, where they can just randomly have great years. I mean, you look at a guy like Robert Quinn, who, when the Dolphins got him, he looked like he was done. And then a couple of years later, he's got 15 and a half sacks with the Bears. So Jadeveon Clowney last year with the Ravens coming out of nowhere and having 9.5 sacks after, just kind of being in the NFL, lost in the NFL world for 2 or 3 years. Edge rushers, you can kind of get guys, you can find guys that just have breakout seasons kind of out of nowhere.
That brings up a question that I had earlier in the linebacker discussion. Do you think that they may attempt to move Tyndall to not maybe a full-time edge, but kind of like that role that Baker played a few years ago where he rushed off the edge? He's the biggest linebacker on the roster as far as off-ball linebackers. I think he's like 6'2", 240, something in that range. I mean, that's not a huge edge player, but he's got the speed. Do you think that's an option? Like they're looking at him and say, listen, just when we put you out there, you just get after the passer.
I mean, I think at this point, they should be willing to try anything to make him salvageable, including that he's been a really good blitzer at Georgia. Jacoby Brissett back in New England. The Patriots have their QB1, everybody. Look at that.
The Patriots are going to sign Jacoby Brissett as the quarterback. They just traded Mac Jones to the Jacksonville Jaguars. So now they're going to be like, well, we got to replace him with somebody. How about that guy, Jacoby Brissett? He was pretty good for us back in the day. So,
I mean, he's going to hold the seat warm for whoever they draft at 3.
Yeah. I mean, yeah.
Well, hopefully they don't turn into the next Patrick Mahomes. My God, that would suck. Anyway, continue your thoughts. I just wanted to point that out to everybody.
No, ultimately Channing Tindall, he's a fantastic athlete. they should be willing to try just about anything with him at this point to make it work, because I don't think, Vic Fangio clearly didn't see much in him. Year one, he was drafted as a project player. I think nobody really expected him to see too much time on the field year one. Year three, this is kind of like that, it's time to go year at this point with him. So I think that using him maybe in a different way, maybe Anthony Weaver's a fresh set of eyes on him, kind of has a different idea in terms of how to use him, and he's certainly athletic enough to be a really good pass rusher. So I wouldn't be against that at all.
All right. So we're gonna go ahead. Go ahead. Because I see you're.
I was just gonna say on the edge rusher thing, like there's room to bring in an edge rusher even in the first round of the draft, in my opinion, just due to the fact that there is a world in which you could possibly move off of Bradley Chubb next season. If they didn't and they decided to restructure him and kick it another year down the line, you're in position then where you're possibly playing Jalen Phillips and a Bradley Chubb. At that point, you're almost close to $50 million in between those two players. At that time and time, like again, like similar to the wide receiver thing, how much money do you have to bring in Andrew Van Ginkel type? To come in and contribute and be that depth rotational edge player to give those guys a little bit of relief. So like at that point in time, I think whether you keep a Chubb or not, there's a room in which he could, replace him or possibly just be that guy to help, ensure those guys are able to do their thing while they're out there and they're not gassed. So like even in that world, there's still room for an edge rusher. And I mean, there's the old adage that you can never have too many cornerbacks, never have too many pass rushers. So I think especially in a passing league, like there's always room for a guy like that. So to you guys' point, I do think we're in a position in which we could go a variety of different ways and address a variety of different positions, especially edge rusher, in my opinion.
Speaking of edge rusher, looks like the Seahawks are about to close in on Leonard Williams. Well, he's a little bit of both, if I'm not mistaken. He's a interior and edge too.
Well, they traded for him last season.
Oh, he was already on the Seahawks?
Yeah, they traded for him mid-season. Gave up, I think, a second-round pick for him. So, I mean, they're just why they didn't re-sign him beforehand, I don't know. But
okay, I thought for sure that he was actually not already there. But
hey, quick question: the guy that what was that guy's name? The really good guys had a really good career with San Francisco D tackle. Is it
Eric Armstead?
Is he
another
still
Armstead?
Is he still on the market right now?
He just got cut, so yeah, he's still out there.
Might be a guy to watch. I mean, the guy's had a really good career. I don't know.
He's also old and slow.
He's going to be expensive too, but
no,
because he doesn't count against the compensatory formula due to the fact that he was released. So maybe
he won't be expensive. Nope. Because he's been hurt, he's old, he's slow, he's that's what a lot of 49ers fans are saying. Is like they've had enough of the guy. It's like, nope, we're not losing any sleep over it. So, and if 49ers fans are not like, oh my God, why? Then every time I see a fan base just be like, whatever. That gives me bad vibes because
you mean like when we traded away Devontae Parker and said good riddance?
Nobody was mad about Parker, bro. Who was mad about Devontae Parker leaving?
Nobody was.
Nobody. That's the point. That's where,
my point. That's
where the New England
point.
fans should have been like, maybe this guy sucks.
But that's literally my point. If there are 49ers fans who are like, oh, Eric Armstead, okay, hasta la bye-bye. They don't care. That tells me maybe Miami shouldn't be jumping at the bit to go get him. That's my point.
Well, guys like that can pick and choose kind of where they want to go. They're not going to necessarily be first guys off the market because of those factors. So, I mean, maybe somebody just really wants him on the team, but usually those guys kind of sit and bide their time, and then they'll pick somewhere later down the road, especially if they're not getting a lot of calls and stuff like that. So,
because they're already
I think
money.
Yeah, I mean, is Kinlaw, is he a free agent?
We've already heard from Alf about Javon Kinlaw. Like, no, thank you.
I just couldn't remember if he was a free agent or if he was on the 5th year option.
I mean, I think they decided not to to exercise that though on him.
I'd have to look that up. I don't know off the top of my head.
All right. We're going to go ahead and call it here. There will probably be more news coming out later on, but if that is the case, then we have another episode of Pulse of Fins Nation tomorrow, the actual regularly scheduled program that you guys will be able to tune in for. So thank you to everybody who joined us. Thank you, Eric. Thank you, Chad from Inside Leverage. Thank you, Chad Ronenbaum. Thank you, Ron. Thank you, Duke. Thank you, Ethan. Thank you. Who else popped in? Anybody else came in? I'm losing count now. Well, in any case, everybody in the chat, by the way, this is one of the most active chats we've had in a very long time. Everybody, thank you so much for joining us. We really appreciate it. And by the way, anybody who did not remember, you can still, if you are not living in South Florida, you can still go to prizepicks.com. Use that promo code 5, that's FIVE, and they will match up to $100 on your deposit when you sign up. For those of you who do live in South Florida, I promise you Prize Picks is working on a new game that you will be able to enjoy and get back to trying to win some extra cash. And for those of you who have not already done so, if you're watching this on YouTube, make sure you click on the links in the description below to get your hands on either Super Mario RPG or Super Mario Brothers Wonder. Both games are available for you to purchase, and you can get bonus items upon making your purchase using the links in the description below when you buy it. All right, everybody, the off season is just beginning. Free agency this is only tampering time. The pens have not been put to paper yet. So there is still a lot more work to do. I'm still expecting a Tyreek Hill restructure. I am still expecting a Tua extension at some point. I still want to see the Teron Armstead contract, for God's sakes. I'm waiting for that. So there's still a lot more work to do. This is only just the beginning. And I don't know if Ron's going to be around. Ron makes it a point to not be around in the off season, but the rest of us will be around to keep an eye on everything for you guys. Ron, are you going to be around? Can I drag you out kicking and screaming for a few more shows?
You could drag me out in a couple weeks after we've seen more free agency, and you can drag me out the week after the draft, and then you're not going to see me until July, brother.
Ron, I would like to do an hour episode tomorrow to talk about the Jake Bailey contract with you.
Oh, yeah, I didn't even talk about it. I will go off about Jake Bailey tomorrow. I promise you that. All right, we're done. Thank you, everybody, for joining us. Tune in to 5 Reasons Sports. We will have more content for you later on. Bye-bye.